Well, thank you. Thank you for joining today. This is definitely a bittersweet moment for us because it is the last Elevate Her project team presentation. But I think this is a very special group, and what they have to present today is unique and truly has the power to change the AEC industry and make a big impact on the lives of the people working in the industry, as well as using the structures and environments that are created by people in the AEC industry. So very, very cool idea we have here. I do want to say this is an ongoing project, definitely something that we're going to hopefully be able to continue on to next year. So this group is going to stay involved and is also looking for people who would like to be involved with carrying it forward next year and then beyond. And what you're going to hear about today is called Drive, which is a points-based index to measure diversity, equity, and inclusion at both the quantitative and qualitative levels. After the presentation is over, we will have a Q&A, so feel free to use that Q&A box there at the bottom of your screen with any questions you have, and hopefully we'll be able to have a good discussion. Okay, so without further ado, I will let this begin.
I'm Mary Heath, Chief Marketing Officer for a firm headquartered in Durham, North Carolina. I'm excited about ElevateHER because it's given us an opportunity to connect with others from around the country to look for real solutions to further diversity, equity, and inclusion in our industry.
I'm Shannon Acevedo, and I'm a planner in Northeast Florida. We all know that diversity and inclusion can help promote successful projects by having the right mix of people at the table. And we also know that land development decisions can affect at least a generation or more. For that reason, I decided to join this project team and try to come up with a way to comprehensively measure diversity and inclusion.
My name is Andrea Dumont. I'm a civil engineer and blogger out of Austin, Texas, and I work in water infrastructure.
I'm T. Daniels, marketing manager in Portland, Oregon. I'm super excited to be a part of ElevateHER, especially the Drive group, to create a framework that project teams can implement to make their projects more diverse and equitable.
My name is Marianne Wachter, and I'm a structural engineer with Bureau Happold in Los Angeles.
I'm Jennifer Ridd, an associate and structural engineer at JQ Engineering in Dallas. As part of the ElevateHER 2020 cohort, our team was struck by the lack of external accountability for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the AEC industry. Inspired by LEAD, our project is the groundwork for a points-based index called Drive that will measure diversity, equity, and inclusion at both quantitative and qualitative levels. Realizing that projects in the built environment have a reach far beyond just the insular design team, the Drive Index will include indicators and metrics for all levels of the project, from the design team to the stakeholders and funding sources, and finally, it will also measure overall community impact as well. By assessing the bigger picture, Drive will lead to higher quality projects that better serve the community as a whole, with an end goal of becoming a metric that is desired and hopefully required on projects. Drive can be used to raise public awareness of DEI issues in the design industry, enhance the diversity of project funding, and also promote diversity at the design team level. More importantly, Drive will ensure inclusivity for project end users at all levels of the community.
DRIVE stands for diversity, real, inclusivity, value, equity. Our vision is that we want our industry to strive to have performance best practices that have beneficial impact to our communities. As nonprofits, government agencies, architects, engineers, developers, builders, contractors, manufacturers, and industry leaders, we want to create a world that is representative of the communities that we serve in order to better serve those communities. That's why we're committed to building a program that recognizes efforts and success, measures inclusion adequately, and strives for continued advancement of inclusive projects to meet the needs of our diverse 21st century world.
We want to redefine the way people evaluate diversity and inclusion in our project teams and in our companies. In the past, efforts to increase diversity on project teams have taken the form of establishing hard requirements on project team makeup. Some of these requirements are having a minority or woman-owned stake of over 51%, being designated a small business in terms of revenue, and establishing limits on the owner's personal net worth. These requirements also vary geographically, and in many cases, more than one must be met, leading to a nearly impossible puzzle in terms of assembling a diverse team. When we first met in person to develop this project, we were dismayed by the fact that there's not enough incentive for companies that can't currently meet the ownership or business size qualifications to have a hand in moving our industry forward for diversity and inclusion. Companies that do currently meet these qualifications and are also discouraged from growing or being sold, as they will no longer be able to fit into that current puzzle required for assembling a diverse team. We believe that there is an opportunity for a new framework, our Drive framework, that recognizes and highly values current diversity initiatives, but also brings in businesses that don't meet those qualifications today and gives them clear guidance to become more diverse and be recognized for their efforts to help move our industries forward.
We do not want to overhaul all of the work that's already been done to date because it has benefited many companies, and we certainly don't want to cause an impediment to people who have their business structured that way and who depend on percentages or how our system currently works. So what we want to do is just augment it. And we don't have everything vetted out, but what we envision is still the ownership of a company playing a huge role, perhaps being weighted even more than what the makeup is within the company.
Myself and 5 others have been working over the course of this year to try to elevate the inclusivity of our industry, because we know that the designs that we create are affecting not just people within our industry, but also our communities, our families, and our neighbors. We know that architecture, engineering, and construction, or the AEC industry, is still about 20% white women, 10% non-white women, and 70% males, with white males making up 51% of the workforce. These are the people that are making decisions that are impacting our diverse world and the infrastructure where we live. Our mission is to push for higher quality projects that focus on community needs by having diverse stakeholders, assessing projects on inclusivity metrics, interactions with the communities we serve. It's a reimagination of diversity, inclusivity, and equity goals with a focus on impact, not just procurement dialogues. An important aspect of our program is recognizing DEI efforts and constant growth. We see this as an opportunity for the AEC industry to align with the future of work and the future expectations of us from our communities. We're beginning to quantify the impact of DEI through analysis of case studies and discussions with subject matter experts. We're at the beginning stages and expect this framework to shift as we get more input from diverse voices. We'd like you to be one of these voices. I know that your mission is to help support and advocate for diversity in the industry. And with a spotlight on diversity right now in the world, we want to begin to have those conversations with you. Right now, we have a framework of what sorts of elements describe an inclusive project at 3 different levels. They are the organization level, with the communities doing the projects, the owners of the projects, and the leaders and folks working on the projects. The project level, with the type of project completed and who are the people and communities that the projects serve, decisions made through the project process, and supply chain for the project. And the community level, for the amount of engagement through the process, education of communities, mentoring, and giving back. I am a water resources engineer who manages projects for large pumping systems, dams and reservoirs, and water utilities around the world. So at the project level, my experience is that there are an infinite amount of decisions that can be made on where to locate pump stations, funding structures, community education and engagement, among many other things. On top of that, there's technical decisions, like do we use reuse water instead of groundwater? Other markets are equally impacted by these seemingly only technical decisions, but have repercussions for diversity and inclusivity in the surrounding communities. A large example of this is in transportation projects that affect the flow of traffic through a city, which changes accessibility along with economic mobility. Many of us are in the industry because we see it as a calling, and we love to get into the technical details. However, the gap is that as trained professionals, we don't always know the best way to help a community that is more diverse, or we can't articulate the business benefits to our stakeholders. This framework is intended to help identify ways to be inclusive, how to quantify the return of it, and forward our involvement with our communities. We like to think of it as synonymous to the LEED point system for sustainable buildings and recognition by the greater public for returns on investment. It's a beginning of a dialogue between our AEC industry and our communities.
Many of the attributes Andy just described are qualitative ones, which can be a little bit tricky to measure, but they are important as it relates to diversity and inclusion. Consider this. There was a study of leading companies worldwide, 1,069 firms were included within this research, that looked to measure whether or not diversity and inclusion led to success and business productivity. The results were interesting. They did lead to success, showing gender diversity, but only in contexts where gender diversity was viewed as normatively accepted. What this means is that checking a box is not enough. Diversity and inclusion has to be ingrained within the culture and belief system of that organization to be truly worthwhile and lead to some of those success indicators. Luckily, many of the attributes we found to affect diversity and inclusion appear to interlink with attributes organizations would be looking to monitor for continuous improvement anyways. Our approach is simple. Let's see who's doing this right and what insight we can gain that could potentially feed into a measurable indicator. In an effort to identify some success stories, we made a call for projects that featured diversity and inclusion and heard about a very unique story about an all-girls school in Austin, Texas that has an opportunity for expanding its campus. The Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders project and team makeup exhibited many of the qualities that we had started to tease out as being important for the progression of diversity and inclusion. The school itself nurtures leadership, courage, and inspires independent thinking and creative and ethical problem solving from its all-girls student body of 6 to 12 graders. From the beginning, the principal of the school knew that the team they chose to take the lead on the project, O'Connell Robertson, got the gist of what was important to them. Amy Jones, the first female president and co-CEO for O'Connell Robertson, knew that it would be important to get the right mix of people on the project team.
So the consultant team that we put together for the Ann Richards project was really diverse for multiple reasons. But a key reason was the Austin Independent School District in releasing this $1 billion bond program. They were also releasing a new hub program. So they had minority firm participation requirements that were part of the process. And so we always work very hard to meet the goals of a client in the minority participation areas. So we identified firms that we had historic working relationships with, but that met the criteria they were looking for. And in the Austin School District, these goals have sub-goals. So not only, they really aren't even looking for an overall percent participation. They're looking for a certain percentage participation from a women-owned firm, from Hispanic-owned firms, from Asian American-owned firms, and from African American-owned firms. So one of the challenges that we often face as a prime firm that is not a hub firm is how do you find qualified consultants in each of these areas that also match up to the percent of service that you need, the percent of the fee for the project. You know, we looked at how we could do that, and we ended up asking one of our longtime partners on the structural side that was a Hispanic-owned firm if they would be willing to support a minority African American-owned structural engineer who's basically a one-person firm. He would never have had the opportunity to work on a $60 million project or $57 million project because he's just not big enough. However, in the process, the school district doesn't really identify that. They just see him as an African American owned firm on the list and assumed there's plenty of firms in this category and plenty of firms in the Asian owned category, but they aren't really drilling down to see, are they firms that could work on a project this large? And so it does create some challenges for the prime firm in figuring out how to put together a team that can, meet the client's goals from a delivery standpoint, but also meet their hub goals. So the way that we found we could do this was by asking, one of our partners if they would support a smaller firm being part of their team. And so our structural engineer did agree to do this. And so we actually paired a large Hispanic-owned structural engineering firm with a small, very small local, really a sole proprietor that met the African American goals to deliver that part of the project. And then we were able to meet our Asian goals through the civil portion, which is another large portion of this project. But then we had to go stitch together, 4 or 5 different women-owned firms, 1% here, 2% there, 3% here, to meet, a women-owned goal of 9.8%, almost 10%. So I think a lot of times owners don't understand the challenges that they're putting forth when they're asking for you to meet hub goals and get hub participation when they have subcategories like this and when some of the projects are so large. And so you have to really have an attitude and an approach where you really want to work together as a team to meet their goals as well as deliver the best project. And so I think it's important for owners to work with design firms and contractors as well on this issue when they're establishing their program, and think about what it is you're asking us to do. And is it really meeting your goals of providing more opportunities for underserved, communities or businesses? Because on the other hand, there is another firm that was involved in this particular program that, this firm has grown 200% because of this local bond program, because they were the only or one of very few. This firm is now on 8 out of 10 of every project. So now there is a lack of opportunities for maybe small local firms that are maybe not minority owned, because this work keeps going to this particular firm because there's so few in a subcategory. So I think we have to really keep in mind, what are we really trying to do with diversity goals and how do we get there? And I think everyone should be at the table. Another thing that I found is a lot of times when the owners are putting these programs together, they only invite the minority-owned firms to the table to develop the plan. They never invite the firms that are not minority owned, that are maybe the larger firms or the firms that have experience in these areas, that are going to put together the teams to get their feedback on how will you do this? How will you meet these goals? And what are the challenges that you see? And I think that's an important part of the conversation. And then there's another important part of the conversation. To meet many diversity goals established by owners, the minority ownership has to be 51%. That's a barrier for many women and minorities to achieve any kind of leadership role or successful growth in a company. What about the companies that are bringing in women into leadership position and ownership, but it's just not 51%, but they've got multiple women in ownership roles, and maybe that's adding up to 30% at this point in time, but it's evolving and they're getting no credit for that. And I think that's a problem.
Talk a little bit about the team dynamics and how people communicated from the start.
Yeah, and so with the client and the campus from the very beginning, I think I told you guys one of the coolest stories was our first day. We like to go on site and try to get an understanding of how they operate. Each school campus operates, has their own unique personality. So we wanted to get a vibe of that. And we show up and all of the administrators had sent us out into groups, and there was a group of students, the girls, that led us. So it was a representative from their lower junior high to their high school, 3 to 4 girls, and the administrators went back to their desks and they were done. The girls led the tour, and they told us about how their life is. They stopped and talked about the flow and a typical day in the life from each of their perspectives. It's, that was pretty telling to show up on site right there, just how much expectation and how much freedom and autonomy that they give the girls, and the girls own it, and that was really cool. Really just kind of set the tone for the rest of the project. They are a collaborative group that count on everyone providing input and hearing and receiving and adjusting to that input. And it was cool for us to be a part of that, especially in a group that is predominantly women, as education is, and then this is an all-girls school, and to be in this room where you were always challenged but always supported. It was we would always walk away with something that was better than what I could have come up with on my own, and I would learn as much from that conversation as we were asking and hoping to get from them. So I think that all of that was just, that was within the first 2 meetings. That was obvious that this is a norm. This is just how they operate. The part that will certainly carry on with us, there were several things that, as we were talking about what different, educational design components, and as we were challenged by the teachers that are, they are the experts in their field, and they had studied what does space and environment, how does that impact learning, and then we bring our expertise of how does space impact humans, and especially in a learning environment. But having them challenge our perspective with theirs and molding it into this new form, it helped create a dialogue that can be had with other educators on any campus, and a kind of a way of framing that conversation so that we do get just a little bit deeper, more real input that we can apply. I think that's translates. And then even internally within our own group, of just being able to mimic the behavior of my whole team. We were all able to see this happen and see how you can have really rich, challenging conversation in a really productive way. And we're better for that. Like, it's always wonderful to see when somebody has that going well. Communication's hard, so seeing people that do it well and being able to copy that translates to every single day.
I think about this one review that I had with my boss that, we have these annual reviews, and the moment he said, I just really can't see you past an intern, because I had interned while I was finishing up my master's degree and then started as like a full-time employee. And that for me was the aha moment. And I knew I had kind of plateaued at that time, but I realized I'm not going to grow here. I've basically reached my limit here, especially if the people around me and the people who lead me don't see the value in what I bring to the table. And I thought to myself, okay, well, if this is not going to work for me, I need to go another direction. So I spent the better part of the year kind of soul searching. I was seeking out another degree, and my husband was really supportive of it. At this point, I was entirely leaving architecture. I was looking to pursue something else that I felt very passionate about. At this point, I had just been really burned. It was a really rough experience. I think I stuck it out longer than I needed to, just trying to align my skills with this vision that wasn't necessarily right for me. But I didn't know that at the time. So, I put my feelers out there. I started sending out my resume. I saw the opening for O'Connell Robertson, and they were looking for someone who had experience doing educational and healthcare design. I sat down with the director of our San Antonio office first, and really, in the beginning of the conversation, he didn't even start with the questions that you typically have or receive in an interview. He started off with, so tell me your story. What brought you here today? And it made me really think. It took me a little out of my comfort zone, but it was good because I realized in that moment I had a narrative. And so I was able to tell the story about the things that drove me, what I was passionate about, what I was seeking, and what I hoped to gain with the firm. And I think at that moment it offered sort of an instant connection. And so my boss communicated the mission of the firm, our mission-driven motto, and it made me realize, what I was seeking out was to make a greater impact in the lives of people. Working where I was working, I wasn't really doing that. My clients were often a couple or one person or whatever, and it was really tedious work sometimes. But being able to transition into an environment where I was designing schools, or I was working on hospitals where people would be healed. Just thinking about the sheer quantity of individuals who would encounter these spaces throughout the course of this building's lifetime, that was really important to me. I was committed to education. So it married what I was passionate about with my skill set. And I learned pretty quickly here, because of sort of that upbringing, I could talk the talk. I understood all of the jargon, and I was able to really transition pretty easily. And I also realized in transitioning to more of a commercial practice that my skill sets aligned with what we do here. And it was another aha moment, and just made me realize, like, I almost walked away from something that I've invested so much time and money into, because I allowed somebody else to get into my head and try to tell me something about myself that wasn't true. I can't stress the importance of mentorship enough. And I've even seen, within our firm over the past several months, just talking to some of our younger female interns about their experiences, their challenges, their struggles, and being able to help them kind of get where they need to go, provide that guide, be that mentor. And I think being able to start those really early, because a lot of times I think young women just don't know the opportunities that are out there. Nobody's really introduced them to that. And it really just takes that one person to plant the seed.
We know that a guideline like Drive won't be universally adopted unless it's either profitable or morally demanded. The business case for it is there. Research has shown that diverse teams improve the quality of decision making and increase innovation and customer insight. In 2018, McKinsey reported that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on their executive teams were 21% more likely to outperform on profitability and 27% more likely to have superior value creation. And they didn't just find a correlation with gender. They also found that companies with the most ethnically and culturally diverse executive teams were 33% more likely to outperform their peers on profitability. The moral case for diversity and inclusivity is there too. Incidents in recent years and even recent months have brought to light many issues regarding the lack of diversity in other industries and in other parts of society. For instance, every year there's a discussion of how few women are nominated for Best Director at the Oscars. And in recent months, we've seen many important discussions regarding systemic racism and inequality in our American society today. The world has taken notice that not all people have equal opportunity in our world, and now is the time to act. To develop these guidelines, we need to consult a broad range of subject matter experts and stakeholders at all levels of project development to develop the specific indicators for diversity and inclusion that should be measured. To develop the Drive Index, we need to gather focus groups of firm leadership, diversity and inclusion experts, owners groups, public officials, and other organizations which are committed to promoting diversity and well-being in the built environment. The output from these focus groups will be used to develop specific indicators for diversity and inclusivity, which will eventually be combined into the final Drive Index. After creating a preliminary draft of the Drive Index, we want to work with owners who would be willing to require it. We've already met with several developers who are committed to diversity and inclusion both at their project level and in the greater design and construction industry. We also hope to work with groups which typically have fairly strict hub requirements, such as university systems and municipalities, for their feedback. Adoptions by groups such as these can act as a springboard for more global adoption in the future. We are also looking to partner with industry-wide organizations that already support diversity and inclusion initiatives. Groups such as the AIA, the American Society of Civil Engineers, the National Association of Minority Contractors, and National Society of Black Engineers will be crucial in developing and promoting the DRIVE Index.
Similar to LEED, more owners wanted to receive a LEED certification when the public started demanding sustainability efforts in green buildings. We want to create a fun and interactive marketing campaign that helps drive end user awareness and creates engagement. In order to effectively market our DRIVE Index, we need to convince the end users and government entities that this is necessary. If the public demands that the buildings they're living in or working in need to be designed through an equity lens, then it is more likely that the owners will require it from project teams. Our main goal with marketing is to start the dialogue around diversity, equity, and inclusion in our industry. We recognize that there are so many conversations already happening, and we would love to be a part of them. We would like to team with other organizations such as NSBE, SEAO, ASME, NAMCO, and many other industry leaders to host various live town hall style Q&A sessions. We firmly believe that these interactions will help connect us to the right people.
The next step for the development of the DRIVE Index involves you. We're currently developing a webinar and Q&A session to give to various organizations and companies across the industry. We need your participation and feedback in these webinars, whether you agree with our idea or disagree with it. DRIVE cannot be completed by a few people. We need comprehensive participation at all levels of the industry. And for anyone out there who'd like to participate in our group directly, contact us through the Zweig group. We'd love to have you join our efforts or even apply to the continuation of this project in the ElevateHER 2021 cohort.
So this is a multi-year project. We've done some research, but we want to continue to talk to other subject matter experts, but it has to find a home. It cannot live with just an ad hoc group of people. It will need to either find a home in an already established organization or a newly created organization that has oversight of how this is applied. And so again, thinking about it much like USGBC and LEED certification, that other people see that it it may make their project worth more. It may give more credibility to the municipality, to the owner, to the project teams, to the project itself for being better.
All right, everybody.
Hey. Well, first, we'd like to thank everybody for watching our video, and there will be some information sent out with the recording afterwards. There will be some written information that you can review if some of those slides went really fast. But we do have a few questions that have come in, and please keep them coming because we left a lot of time for questions on purpose. The first question, how do you hope that the DRIVE framework supports recruiting and retention within AEC firms? Andy?
Yeah, that's a great.
Uh-oh. Okay, we're going to come back to that one when she's on a job site. We apologize. The second question we'll go ahead and answer is, how will you encourage AEC firm CEOs? Oh, Andy, are you back?
Yeah, I'm going to turn off my video so it's a little easier.
Okay.
So
all right.
Our project was focused externally with our stakeholders and with the people who are in our communities and how they can affect the change that we're trying to drive here within the industry, which obviously is very closely linked to retention and recruiting. We've just got this plethora of data that shows that the retention and recruiting is tied very closely to inclusivity and people feeling like they're included, as well as people feeling motivated and like what they're working on matters. And so this index DRIVE really ties into that piece of like developing something that has a legacy for us and what we're doing in our industry. And that's motivating to our people and therefore goes into retention and recruiting.
All right, so next question. How will you encourage AEC firm CEOs to adopt DRIVE? How can we change the conversation from another set-aside program to focus on the value of a diverse project, or worse, as a workaround to avoid meeting the goals of the current hub WBE DBE? And this is a great question. This is actually, we were really inspired by LEED when we took on this project, because, you know, a lot of architects will tell you that good design is sustainable. And it is, but nobody focused on it until there was an index that everybody was following. And it's almost that peer pressure of the owner wants it because every other project has it, and it looks really good from society because it's a hot button issue in society. And I think we're there with diversity and inclusion right now, just like we were with sustainability and environmental concerns, you know, when LEED came out in the mid 2000s. And so really our goal isn't necessarily to adopt to get CEOs to adopt it. It's really to get the project stakeholders and the owners groups to adopt it and to require it. And long term, we would love it if municipalities and things like that also required it, because just like good design is sustainable, good design is also diverse. So that kind of is where we're trying to go with Drive, as opposed to being very much at a firm level. We really want it to be at a full community level. The next question. What are some ideas or examples of what might qualify for D&I leadership efforts, not just successes? Shannon, if you could take this one. We did develop some sample indicators and then realized we needed a lot more subject matter experts than we could get in 6 months. So, but we have a baseline, Shannon.
That's right. We took a stab at it just putting some things together because we needed to wrap our head around it in some way, but we on purpose didn't include some of the work that we've put together so far because we didn't want to sort of lead all the subject matter experts at what could be possible. But just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, I love this question because we did spend a lot of time thinking about it. You have those typical indicators of demographics and percentages, kind of like what you saw in the case study. But what about those firms that are making efforts toward that? And, you know, everybody has different situations. They may have some other challenges of getting diversity within their organizations or project teams. So one of the things that we'd like to do to take it to the next level is, aside from looking at percent of gender or race or ethnicity or however you want to look at it, what are some tools and policies that we can also incorporate into that index that can be measured and have values, such as, you know, what are firms doing to widen their search for new hires? And for instance, what is the benefit package and how does that appeal to diverse populations? These are some of the things that could be incorporated into the index. That's not a pure black and white, we meet this percentage, can get us in the right direction. As far as keeping people on the team, that gets to even more subjective types of indicators. But one of the things we'd like to look into is how can you measure a firm's capacity to be inclusive? So if retention is something that you're struggling with, are there things that we can measure as far as culture and alignment of shared values that can help put points, if you will, into that index as well? And one of those might be, I think this came up in one of the other Zweig conference programs, is how much are employees involved with strategic development? So that could be another idea of something that could work into that inclusivity piece.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Next question. Why is the AEC industry so resistant to the data on the benefits of diversity? Walmart has supplier diversity goals. Investors in many industries we touch have committed to diversity. Why do you think that this industry doesn't get with it? T?
So this is actually a great question. And this is a question that this whole cohort talked about when we met back in March. And we're like, you know, everyone that's in this room, we get it. We understand that diversity is important. It makes our projects better. But, you know, why aren't other people getting it? Why is our firm leadership or, you know, people at the C-suite not having these conversations? And I think in our industry, most of the firms that we work with are privately owned. So there's not that level of accountability. When you are a publicly traded company, you have a board of directors, you have people that set these goals and have these expectations. And for a really long time, I think DEI has kind of not been at the forefront of our industry, and people haven't really understood the impact of the work that we do, the communities that we design in, how our buildings really affect the community. And I think, historically we haven't been talking about it, but now I feel like so many firms are having conversations, creating DEI roles within their companies, projects like ElevateHER, and I see a ton of other organizations, AIA, they know that this is important. So I'm hoping that this is going to change, and people will be able to see that the data really supports it. And at the end of the day, diversity is only going to benefit your projects and your firms, so hopefully we'll start seeing a change. And for all my other marketers out there, we always kind of joke that, AEC is about 5 to 10 years behind on everything compared to other industries. And this is, one of those things that is a little bit behind as well, but we're hoping to really push that change with this index.
Next question, how are you soliciting participation in the program, the webinars you mentioned? Marianne?
Yeah, so obviously we came together with Zweig Group, and they're kind of who we're going to work with in the future. The best way, honestly, to get involved is to participate in the next cohort. I know a number of us are planning on hoping to stay on kind of an advisory role to keep moving this forward. But really the webinar is going to be developed with Zweig.
Thanks. Okay, another one, hypothetical future. Let's say the AEC industry implements every guideline. All right, sorry about that. Hypothetical future. Let's say the AEC industry implements every guideline and follows every incentive this system pushes. X number of years later, the AEC internal ratios of human subgroups matches up perfectly with the overall population's ratio of human subgroups. Do you retire the scoring system? That's a great question because, first of all, it's impossible to predict the future, but we would love to live in a society where this isn't required, but it is. And I'm going to say something like, I used to be really involved in SWE, Society for Women in Engineering, and they were formed in the 80s, and they thought they would be no longer required by the 90s. And they are still a very active organization. So I don't really think that the goals of this program are going anywhere. It doesn't mean that you don't reassess where you are and adapt it to cultural norms, but there's very much a push right now for it. And if it's not needed, then we can reassess, like I said, we can reassess it. But I mean, LEAD is still in use regularly. And, it was kind of, people were asking the same questions, if we get to a point where every project is sustainable, do we still need this? And it's still something we do. So I don't know if that's a complete answer, but it's a living document, just like anything. All right. Next question. Is there any data related to women leaving the industry during the COVID pandemic to take care of family? Not wanting this to impact growth, there have been discussions related to this. That's a great question. Christy, do you have data on that? That's not data we really looked at for something like this in terms of how COVID was affecting. But Christy, I don't know if you have, I'm sorry to kick this to you, but you have all the data.
Yeah, so we've just really started to dig into some of that specifically with our COVID survey, which I'm happy to send everybody. You can also find it on the news section of our website. And I don't think we have a report that breaks anything down by gender, but in Q3, we started asking some very specific questions about turnover and if people were leaving the industry due to different pressures from COVID and what those specifics are. So definitely we're in the process of gathering it. I have read a couple different studies out there. There's one by McKinsey. There's a Women in the Workplace study as well. So there is some information out there that is not necessarily specific to the AEC industry, but just showing how, I think I read a study that said like how much women are being disproportionately affected by the pandemic and having to deal with homeschooling and increased pressures and responsibilities from that as well as from their jobs. So yeah, check the site, and if you have any specific questions, email me and I'm happy to send you some links to the studies that I have read.
Okay. We did have a comment early in the presentation that we thought was really interesting about someone mentioned that they're an employee-owned firm, which seems to exclude from any type of small business certification. And I think that's an interesting point to address, because that's one of the things we really wanted to address when we came up with this idea. Mary?
Yeah, that comment was very interested and really, puts a spotlight on what we're trying to accomplish here. It's trying to get more people, more businesses, and more people in the game of building more diverse workforces within our companies and more diverse projects. So the criteria that Shannon touched on, that is just a draft and just some ideas or conceptual still at this point, will enable more people to get into the game, whether you're an employee-owned business or if your leadership is not 51% women or minority-owned, you'll still have an opportunity to participate. And so, when you think about managing or incentivizing people, it can be with a carrot or a stick. And so we're really going with the carrot here and trying to get people to participate and see some benefit, feel some benefit from embracing diversity and inclusion efforts within their companies.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, another question. Since this is an index to provide a firm level rating related to DEI, has there been a discussion regarding how frequently firms would need to be re-rated or recertified? Andy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that one. So it's a great question, especially because there's the 3 tiers, and one of the tier is at, the firm level. And this is something that we haven't really talked about as a group yet, as we've been focusing on the indicators and, what is an indicator that, says a firm is being inclusive and diverse. And so it's something that we're hoping to do in this next phase of the project, is get everybody's different opinions into our conversation and pull up issues like this, things like this that we certainly need to talk about and think through, but we just haven't been able to wrap around yet. And so I'm really excited this question came in, because it just highlights, how much work there is to do if we're really going to do something this big that really changes and impacts our industry.
Okay. Keep sending your questions, everybody. We really want to talk to you and get your feedback on this. Next question. How is this different than other diversity index that we see in the industry, like JUST? T?
Yeah, so I think our index is unique because we really want to focus on the qualitative data as well, because a lot of certifications are either you hit this check mark and you get the certification, right? So we want to move beyond just the check mark and give everyone a fair advantage. And JUST does a really good job, and it focuses on, the transparency of what you're doing within your firm. But I think our main focus is like the projects, right? So we'll have firms that are, certified with JUST, but we want to make sure the people that are working on the projects also represent that from all the different firms. So it's an overall accountability, not just placed on one individual firm.
Okay, great, thanks. And one more, where does this go from here? Are you going to see it through? Marianne?
Yeah, so as I previously mentioned, and what was mentioned at the beginning of the talk, is that we're going to have this as a continuation of a project within the next ElevateHER cohort. And I think a few of us want to sort of continue to help and see this through because we're all really passionate about it. So yeah, it's going to be something that it wasn't something that we could wrap up in 6 months. So it's important that this work is kind of carried forward, and especially because as we started working, we realized that we definitely need more diverse voices to be heard within the development of this index. And so we need the time to get those subject matter experts and their opinions as part of the index.
Yeah, like Shannon mentioned earlier, we actually have a lot of work that wasn't presented today because it's in process. It's not completed. It's not polished. We don't have a finalized index to show you, but we have really great framework. We have really great ideas, and we really need people to jump on board and see it through. And I don't see any more questions. Does anyone else have any questions for us? Okay, seeing none, hand it back over to Zweig. Oh,
Jen, I did see that in the chat, Jamie has posted the link to the 2021 cohort. And just to reiterate, we are looking for people to help and different voices, and some of your ideas as you're listening to this today about, what are we missing? What are our blinders in terms of diversity? Because, we all have things, values and ideologies that are similar. And we know that you guys out there have different views and values. And so we want to know that. So feel free to reach out to us and send us an email, talk to us through Zweig. We're really interested in getting feedback from you and, either pivoting or continuing on with that feedback.
all right. I guess I'll hand it back to the Zweig team since I don't see any more questions for us.
If we have no further questions, we can wrap this up. Definitely, if you would like to be a part of this, or any other ideas or new ideas you might come up with for next year, let us know. You can check out the ZG ElevateHER.com and also the ElevateHER page on the Zweig Group website. We have the application for 2021 up there, or just send us an email at ElevateHER@zweiggroup.com. We would love to have your input, or also have any of you be a part of our group for next year. Thank you again, Team Drive. You guys are amazing. Great work on this. Really, truly an amazing idea. And I'm so excited to see where it goes from here. So thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great afternoon.